Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling in Nurgle's Garden and currently sick. Today we're going to be ranking the Lords of War. First up, a quick breakdown. The Lords of War are rarely super competitive, aside from things like Knights, which are their own army of super heavies, and the Tau Storm Surge, which was a sort of standout unit when it comes to Lord of Wars. So a lot of this is based around how fun I think they'd be to use, though they may have some unrecognized potential, especially with the recent buffs that the Chaos Space Marines have gotten, the buffs they can apply to things. Especially removing their CP cost, making all these cost 0 CP to field. So first up, we have the Kharbydis Assault Pod. I believe I forgot to put the tiers, but this one is in tier 3. The Kharbydis Assault Pod is essentially two drop pods strapped together. It's got 20 transport slots, or 1 Dreadnought/Hellbrute, which I think is very dumb. It has 5 souped-up missile launchers, gaining extra HP and 2d6 shots in frag mode, and 2 shots per in crack mode. It's got 4 Strength 16 AP4 Damage 3 attacks, and a Strength 8 AP4 D6 plus 2 attack. The main issue is its 400 points of similar melee damage and only half slots. This thing is either needed way more transport capacity or a bit more damage. Or, I think, because for that, I believe the normal Dreadclaw drop pod just does what it does, but better. Because the Dreadclaw has quite similar melee, can transport nearly as many, and has decent, is significantly cheaper. So this either need to do far more damage or have way more transport capacity. Maybe 20 transport slots and a Dreadnought, or even more than that. However, it is a cool model. I just don't think that out of the Lords of War, it's very impressive. Next up is the Chaos Falchion. It is a super heavy hunter. Its Volcano Cannon gets full rerolls to wound against Titanic units, and while it has 2d3 shots, it is still a bit monodimensional to be really worth it. Really good anti-tank shots are nice, but paying 550 points for it isn't really worth it. The Fellblade, I think, fills the role and can flex into anti-infantry quite efficiently. I think this version, as they're both on the same chassis, is infinitely inferior compared to its normal cousin. Though, having massive damage guns like those Volcano Cannons, which I believe are flat damage 6 or 8, is very fun. I just think that the normal Fellblade does it better. Next up is the Chaos Spartan in Tier 3. The Spartan got really showed up by its smaller brother in the Chaos Codex, who is now significantly more durable. Though having 25 transport slots does mean it's very fun, as it can transport 20 Chosen in something like a suite of characters. However, it's about as tough as the Classic or Loyalist Land Raiders are now for nearly double the cost, meaning I think this thing is just not worth it at all unless you really just want to have 20 Chosen pile out of a single vehicle, which would be rather funny. Next up is the Chaos Sokar-Pattern Stormbird. The Stormbird, I think, is sort of a strange unit among the Lords of War, as I believe it is the most expensive one available for the Space Marines. It costs an absolute insane 1,000 points. At a normal 2,000 point list, you will likely only be able to make use of the Crazy 50s transport slots very minimally, as you'll have barely any points left to buy a huge amounts of infantry. Its guns are respectable, having a very high damage rocket launcher, 8 las cannon shots, and 18 heavy bolter shots. Also, being toughness 8 with a 2+ save and a 5+ with 2 void shields means it is actually somewhat durable. I find it's better suited to games with things like 3k point limits or more narrative-focused games. Next up is the Chaos Typhon Tier 2. I believe this is the cheapest Lord of War in the game at 320 points, though the Gorkanaut and Morkanaut might have something to say about that. It's essentially a Spartan with its transport capacity traded out for a giant gun. That gun only does flat damage 3, at strength 10 AP4, and with 2d6 shots, it's actually pretty effective against most units in the game. 2d6 blast can clear infantry and heavy infantry quite efficiently, and at high damage and strength, it can get rid of those very pesky Terminator weight class units. Honestly, as far as vehicles like tanks go, I think it's quite well rounded, especially as far as the Lord of War goes. Next up is the Chaos Thunderhawk in Tier 2. The Thunderhawk is essentially a cut-price Stormbird, and in my opinion, a much cooler Stormbird, with less las cannons but better other weapons. The same missile launchers, a cannon similar to the Chaos Typhon actually, with better damage. However, it suffers from similar issues to the bigger plane. It costs so much that it can actually be hard to totally use its transport capacity to the fullest. Though I do think, since it's such an iconic unit, it is still quite fun. Next up, we have the Chaos Fellblade. The Fellblade I find to be quite interesting. It is a massive tank for 550 points. Its accelerator cannon has 2 modes. Similar to others, they work well against most targets. In terms of upgrades, I think the laser destroyers are reasonable. Toughness 8 with a 2+ save and 26 wounds means it can be reasonably survivable. Like similar super heavy tanks for the Loyalists, it can really shine with varied buffs they can get from things like Warpsmiths to get those weapons to crack their targets, as their Action Express, or AE rounds, are quite powerful. I believe they're flat damage 5, if I'm not mistaken, though I did put this slide together a little while ago. I do actually quite like the Fellblade. It looks like a very fun unit to use, and here it is painted up in World Eaters. Next up, we have the Kytan Ravager. It is the most budget of the Lord of Skulls sort of weight class of Lord of Wars. It's stuck with the head of the Hades Gatling Cannon, which is an okay, strength 8, AP 2, damage 2. But the Skull Cannon performs better in most circumstances, I think, without real questions. Though its cleaver is pretty deadly. If you want that deadly cleaver for cheap, this is your walker, as it only costs about 440 points with no points upgrades. I mean, that is actually pretty cheap for a unit that can really mess things up in melee, though it's certainly outshone by the next two models on this list. Next up, we have... Oh, I forgot about this guy. The Chaos Mastodon. The Mastodon is my favorite traditional vehicle Lord of War. It's 750 points, and at toughness 9, a 2+ save, 30 wounds, 2 void shields, and a 5+ invuls, it's actually a tough to a lot of the most common anti-tank weapons in the game, such as multi-meltas coming out of something like a drop pod. And Eldar Lances certainly won't appreciate wounding on 5s. It can transport 40 infantry and Dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts/Hellbrutes, which take up 10 slots each. It has some respectable guns, a Siege Melta array, which is a 6-shot Melta gun, a Sky Reaper battery, which is a souped-up autocannon that demolishes flyers, and a pair of las cannons and heavy flamers. Now, I just really like the way this thing looks, and I think having that many transport slots inside of something that I think, could actually be respectably durable, many weapons are just going to bounce off it really, really poorly. And some of the most common weapons like Lightning Claws with their reroll wounds aren't even going to be that effective because they're going to be wounding on 6s most of the time. However, I still think it's more relegated to a fun choice, but it certainly looks like a very fun choice. I also really like the aesthetics of this one. This might be one I get when I have, way more subscribers. Next up is the Greater Brass Scorpion, which I believe falls into Tier 1, which is the other budget Lord of Skulls. This one packs in some decent psychic protection. It has a whole suite of guns that are, tailored to different things, but having so many guns means that it can stack saves on just about anything. And it actually gets a 3d6 charge, which means it's very easy to get this thing into combat, even from, 12 inches away. I think it'd be quite common to get it, especially with a CP reroll involved. And its claws are pretty much the exact same as the cleaver, being able to destroy heavy units and some infantry if need be. I really like the Brass Scorpion, and this is another one that I quite like the look of. And then finally, we have the Codex choice, the Khorne Lord of Skulls. I'd say it's the best of the Lord of Wars. It has the best cleaver stats, as its sweep mode is slightly better. Its guns are quite general purpose. It's got a 2+ save. It can regen wounds very well, since it regens 1, and then you can have a Warpsmith healing it. Among all the Lord of Wars, this is one of my personal favorites, and that's not just because I own one and I'm currently painting one. I do think that with a bunch of buffs on this thing, it could actually be pretty impressive. And it's, of course, quite an iconic unit and very imposing on the tabletop. My name has been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.